You can't make this stuff up. The View and Whoopi Goldberg's terrible political takes are nothing new, but you're about to see what happens when the modern far left struggles to make sense of its own intersectionality on something like the abortion debate. Candace Owens ripped those arguments to shreds, but there's still more to come I need to tell you about after we watch the next clip.
Welcome back. For today's Counterpoint segment, I wanted to discuss the recent Supreme Court abortion case. Honestly, this isn't even about whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. I just do not like bad arguments. And the arguments that are coming from the left right now are absolutely bonkers. So let's start with absolutely bonkers, Joy Behar.
It's a very interesting schism that goes on here because on the one hand, sex sells everywhere. I mean, you can't see an aspirin commercial without somebody having sex. Mm-hmm. You cannot turn on any program, especially on streaming, where people are having, there's soft everywhere now. Right. They encourage all of that. It sells everything. Sex sells. Yeah. And yet when it comes to the reality of pregnancy, this particular group of people on the right in this country and these religious zealots do not understand the reality of what happens when you have sex.
I don't think she knows that it's not pronounced shesh, but we'll pretend that there's an H somewhere in there. For Counterpoint number one, I want to say, yes, Joy Behar, you are correct. Sex is everywhere. Our culture is sick. That isn't an argument, that's a diagnosis. We have an increasingly sick culture here in America. It would seem to me that it's the atheist zealots, the ones who have normalized sex-laden aspirin commercials, that don't quite understand what happens when you have unprotected sex. And then when they find out, they go, whoops, well, good thing I learned in health class that I can just get an abortion to deal with it.
You know what's baffling about the abortion debate in this country? It's perhaps the one area where all of the far left's intersectional identity-based views are forced to concede, resulting in a web of cognitive dissonance that none of them can untangle. They'll say things like no uterus, no opinion before telling you that the word woman can be completely detached from its biological reality. They'll try to liberate physical intimacy from committed relationships and be surprised that it results in a culture where this crude abortion debate is even necessary. They'll say only women get the right to choose what happens to the baby even when it takes two people to make it. This is why it always makes for a really interesting segment when you push someone like this against the wall and force them to make sense. As Ronald Reagan once said, quote, "I've noticed everyone who is for abortion has already been born." And unfortunately, it's that culture that's bred with this narrow identity-based politics on such a sensitive matter just results in a bitter response from the male side who start to check out the entire process after being disillusioned.
Did you know, Joy, that before federally funded sex ed programs in school, which sprang up in the 1970s, and before Roe v. Wade in 1973, teenage pregnancy rates in this country were declining over a period of 12 years. Maybe what we on the right understand is that there is such a thing as sexually transmitted insanity, the normalization of non-committal sex, which is pervasive in our culture and in our schools, and it serves no one, least of all the young women who wind up pregnant and are pressured to make a life-altering emotional decision that is packaged to them as the responsible thing to do. I believe that you and the ladies that sit beside you contribute daily to that toxic culture of lies.
Now, on that point, there's some really interesting studies that reveal that the teenage pregnancy rates in America are actually on a consistent decline, but not for the reasons you'd think. It's not because there's more discipline around physical intimacy or a culture of abstinence. Underneath that drop is a rampant hookup culture that's as pervasive as ever, protected from consequences by the use of contraceptives. That means our attitudes to physical intimacy have only declined. In fact, they've only made worse when they're made pawns in the culture wars of our time, all the while people on both sides of the political spectrum use these very real issues more as a talking point than trying to solve them. And as you can imagine, none of this is without consequence. The United States' current fertility rate stands at just under 1.8 births per woman, which is much below the minimum rate of 2.1 needed for a replacement rate. And since fertility rates can drop exponentially very quickly, it's a problem that needs to be addressed as a factor of societal attitudes around having children, intimacy, and committed relationships. When all of that breaks down and physical intimacy just becomes a mode of pleasure in a hedonistic culture, these crude discussions around aborting children are bound to come up. In this sense, the problem is far deeper than abortion at a level of analysis you can hardly expect from The View.
Do any of you men have any eggs or the possibility of carrying a fetus? How dare you talk about what a fetus wants? You have no idea. Now, I'm fine if you disagree with abortion. I have no problem with that. My problem comes when you tell me what I need to do with my doctor and my family. How dare you? How dare you?
All right, counterpoint to you, Whoopi Goldberg. Number 2. Did you guys know back at home, by the way, that in 2017, Whoopi Goldberg received a GLAAD Media Award for executively producing a show called Strut? It was a transgendered modeling show. She won the award for speaking up for trans rights and against those trying to roll them back. Oopsies! This is why I love intersectionality. Here we are in the middle of a vicious culture war where a bunch of men playing dress up and trying to convince people that they are women and can give birth and they can chest feed. And here comes along Whoopi Goldberg, and she's so fired up about abortion that she accidentally tells the truth. Only women can give birth. Only women have a womb that is capable of carrying a child. They say, never get in the way of our enemies when they are making a mistake. They also say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. I say, thanks, Whoopi, for proving that even idiots are capable of understanding basic biology.
That's hardly even a surprise when your political positions are so compartmentalized, it's possible to make sense of anything, even two opposing ideas at the same time. The problem is that these ideas are hardly ever challenged to someone in the same conversation, holding their feet to the fire and making them make sense. That's why someone like Whoopi Goldberg can go on one stage to champion trans rights and then go after people for daring to have an opinion on abortion if they're not women. This subject perhaps rings closer to Whoopi herself, given how she's detailed even her own teenage pregnancy and subsequent abortion at the age of 15. When she wrote about it in her memoir, The Choices We Made, you'd expect someone like this to be able to understand the sensitive nature of this debate, and yet all you see is the same shallow politicking on an identity basis that any other armchair pundit can do.
We currently have a culture where men are routinely accused of not stepping up to the plate. In fact, just this week, it was announced that only 18% of households in America today feature a nuclear family unit, a married mother and a father raising children. Make no mistake, father absence is one of the biggest, if not the biggest epidemic that we face in this country today. But why are we expecting men to step up to the plate when we have women that are telling them that they don't have to? Why should men step up when the message that is ringing out loud and clear from mainstream culture and media is that beyond sex, men have no responsibility or say in the lives of their children? I mean, how on earth can someone logically explain how a baby is 100% the property of a woman as it grows inside of her, then the moment that the baby is born, it requires a 50-50 split? Can a man stand before a judge at a child support hearing and say, Your Honor, it was her body, and it was therefore her choice to have this child? The answer, of course, is no. Obviously not. That would be stupid.
Honestly, it's just a sad picture overall for grown adults to be tossing around the responsibility of a child like it's a burden when it's one of the most beautiful human experiences ever. The entire process of having a child in our modern culture has been denuded of its true wholesomeness and made out as a chore or a distraction from other things in life. That's why you see the same bitter response from the men's side, some of whom have started campaigning for something like a partial abortion, and this would sign away all their financial responsibility for a child they did want to be carried to term. That paints a bleak picture of where we come and tells us we need to rethink the entire societal conversation around children, abortion, commitment, and intimacy. But let me know in the comments what you think or what you'd like to do about that, because I believe it's only going to become a more important conversation as the years go by.